Aid was their plea, but the Deathworlders of Earth arrived instead. The Velathi conquered did not like panic. Panic made people careless. Careless choices turned small problems into big disasters, and the conquered already had too many disasters. High above the blue-green world of Velath Prime, the Council Dome floated like a crystal seed. Inside it, the air was calm, filtered, and perfectly balanced. The leaders of 7 species sat in a wide circle, each in a seat shaped for their bodies. Their translators hummed softly, turning clicks, tones, and scented breaths into shared words. Director Savaniran of the Velathi opened the meeting with careful control. Her eyes were large and dark, made for dim forests and gentle rain. Today, her gaze looked tired. "We have confirmed it," she said. "The chain failures have spread beyond 3 systems." A low sound moved through the circle. Some species hissed, some shifted, some simply went still. On the wall, a map glowed. Small lights marked inhabited worlds. Too many of those lights were now outlined in warning amber. Minister Havoc of the Tresari leaned forward. His skin was smooth and pale, and he wore a breathing collar even in the dome. "How long?" he asked. Sava did not want to answer, but she had to. 6 months until critical collapse for Velath Prime, she said. Less for the outer colonies, some may already be past saving. The words past saving hung in the air like dust. Nobody challenged them. Nobody even looked angry. Anger took energy, and energy was becoming rare. The conquered had been built for peace, trade, shared science, and careful growth. For generations, they had believed that stable worlds made stable minds. Their technology reflected that belief, elegant, efficient, and delicate. It worked wonderfully until the universe stopped being gentle. First came the solar storms, then unpredictable micrometeor waves, then a plague of algae that thrived in new heat patterns and clogged ocean filters. Then supply lines broke as ships avoided unstable jump corridors. Every fix caused another strain somewhere else, like pulling one thread and watching the whole cloth tighten. They were not weak. They were simply designed for a calmer reality. Sava touched a panel and brought up a list of requests already sent. "We contacted the Zyran Guild," she said. "They refused, too risky. We contacted the Helio monks. They offered prayers and data, but no ships. The Vern Collective offered loans. Their interest rates would end us faster than the storms." A bitter laugh came from one corner. It belonged to Ambassador Kith of the small, insect-like Moru. The translator softened it into something polite. "So," Kith said, "we have run out of friends." "No," said Sava quietly. "Not friends, options." She paused, and the room waited. The pause itself was heavy. Everyone knew what she would say next, but nobody wanted to be the one to speak it first. At last, Minister Havoc asked, "Do you mean Earth?" The map shifted. A new dot appeared far from the Concord's bright cluster, one star in a region that most charts marked with caution. A label followed, simple and cold, Sol/Earth. It was a warning label like corrosive or unstable. Deathworld species came from planets with harsh gravity, aggressive weather, fast-evolving diseases, and constant competition. Most galactic civilizations preferred worlds where life was predictable. Earth was the opposite of predictable. Sava kept her voice even. "Earth has not signed our charters," she said. "They are not part of our trade web, but they have responded to distant messages before, sometimes, and their ships have survived conditions that would cripple ours." Ambassador Renlai of the Illith shook her long head slowly. "Their history reports are disturbing," she said. "They compete even when they do not need to. Their entertainment includes danger. Their children," Sava raised a hand. "We have all read the profiles, yes. Humans are intense." Director Sava did not say what she also knew. Humans were not just intense, they were strange. The few reports available described them as friendly one moment and stubborn the next. They formed bonds quickly. They argued loudly. They made jokes during stress. And they built tools that looked rough but lasted forever. The Morrow ambassador tapped the table. "We asked for gentle aid," Kith said. "Medical teams, ocean engineers, climate stabilizers. Earth is what Earth is." Sava inhaled slowly. "We do not have the luxury of perfect help," she said. "We need help that can arrive." Silence returned, but it was a different silence. It carried the sound of a door opening in the mind. A dangerous door, maybe, but a door. Minister Havoc spread his hands. "Then we send a plea," he said. "Not a contract, not a bargain, a plea." Sava nodded once. "Agreed." A small drone floated to the center of the circle, its lens like a single patient eye. It would record the message and broadcast it across relay chains. It would travel for days and then maybe reach Earth. Sava stood, she faced the lens, and for the first time in her career she allowed a crack of emotion to show. "This is Director Sava Niran of the Velathi Conquered," she began, "to the people of Earth. To the government, the agencies, the ships, and any who can act." She swallowed. Her translator smoothed the sound. "Our systems are failing," she continued. "We face environmental breakdown, supply collapse, and medical strain. We have tried our own solutions. We have asked our allies. We are running out of time." The council members watched her, their faces tight with worry. Some did not blink. "We are not asking for conquest," Sava said, careful and direct. "We are not asking for weapons. We are asking for aid, humanitarian, technical, logistical. We need teams who can work in unstable conditions. We need planners who can build systems that endure. We need ships that can fly through dangerous space." She paused. Then she added the most important sentence, the one that made the message more than words. "We ask because we cannot do this alone." For many cultures, asking like that was shameful, but shame was a luxury too. Sava lowered her head slightly. "If you hear this," she finished, "please answer. Even a small effort would matter. Even a single ship could save thousands. We will coordinate. We will share all data. We will welcome you." The drone beeped softly. "Message sent," it announced. Sava sat back down. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. Now there was nothing to do but wait. 3 days later, far beyond the Conquered, a communications station in the cold outskirts of Sol's system caught the message. The station was not elegant. It was practical, thick plating, many backup power lines, and too many antennas pointing too many directions. A human technician named Rafik Bennett was on duty. He was tall, tired, and drinking something that tasted like burnt beans. His job was mostly quiet: check signals, correct errors, log old broadcasts. He did not expect to find anything that would change his week. Then the alert chimed. "Incoming relay packet," the system said. "Priority extreme." Rafik blinked. "That's new," he muttered. He opened the packet. The translation came through in basic Earth standard. He watched the message once. Then again. Then he leaned back, staring at the screen like it might explain itself. "A whole alliance asking for help," he whispered. He forwarded it to Earth's Interstellar Coordination Office, then to the Emergency Response Network, then to anyone who would pick up quickly. When he finished, he sat very still for 10 seconds, letting the weight of it settle. Earth had its own problems, always. Politics, storms, resource arguments, loud voices. But the message carried a certain kind of honesty that even a tired technician could feel. Somebody out there was drowning, and they had finally called out. Within hours, the signal reached a room with clean walls and hard faces. Commander Elise Morgan watched the message in silence, her jaw tight. Around her, analysts whispered. Some looked nervous, some looked excited, one looked afraid. "Deathworlder reputation is going to scare them," an advisor said. "If we show up wrong, we could cause more problems." Elise folded her hands. "We're not showing up wrong," she said. Another voice, older and cautious. "We must consider the risk. Their systems are unstable. Their biologies are fragile. We can't treat this like Earth disaster response." Elise nodded once. "Then we don't treat it like Earth," she said. "We treat it like people." A screen behind her filled with data about the Velathi Conquered. Atmospheres, gravity ranges, toxins, disease risks, structural weaknesses, food needs. Every red flag was a reason for delay. Elise saw them as reasons to prepare. She turned to her team. "Call the engineers," she said. "Call the medics. Call the logistics planners. I want modular shelters, portable water systems, flexible farms, and repair drones. I want translators that can handle 7 languages, and I want cultural briefings so we don't insult anybody by accident." Someone raised a hand. "How many ships?" Elise looked at the map. She thought about 6 months. She thought about worlds turning amber. "Start with 3, she said, "and prep a second wave." The room went quiet. 3, the advisor repeated. "That's a lot." Elise's eyes stayed on the map. "Not if they're drowning," she said. "It's barely enough." Another analyst hesitated. "Commander, they called us Deathworlders in their files." Elise allowed a small, tired smile. "Good," she said. "Then they know we can handle the rough parts." She stepped closer to the screen as if she could speak through it. "They asked for aid," she said softly. "Let's not make them regret it." Far away in the Velathi Council dome, Director Sava Niran sat beneath the shifting lights and tried not to imagine silence as an answer/UI. Then, on the fourth day, the communications console chimed. A single notification appeared. Incoming transmission, Sol/Earth. "We hear you," it said. "We are coming, tell us where to start." For a moment the council did not speak. No one moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the dome. Then the Moro ambassador let out a shaky click that the translator did not soften. Sava exhaled, long and slow, like someone who had been holding their breath for weeks. "They're coming," she whispered, and in that whisper was relief and fear, because help was on the way, not gentle help, not perfect help. Earth help, the first human ships appeared at the edge of the Velathi Concord's monitored space without ceremony. No bright signals, no dramatic broadcast, just three large shapes sliding out of jump space like stones dropped into still water. Alarms rang anyway. In the Concord's central traffic control station, officers stiffened, screens filled with data as scanners struggled to classify what they were seeing. "Mass readings are inconsistent," an operator said, confusion sharp in her voice. "Hull density is far above standard. External structures appear modular and uneven." Director Sava Niran stood behind them, her hands clasped tightly. She had been called the moment the alert sounded. Now she watched the display with wide, unblinking eyes. "They did not announce approach," one aide said nervously. "Is that normal for them?" Sava shook her head slowly. "We don't know what is normal for humans," she replied. "Open a channel." A moment later, a calm human face filled the central screen. The woman looked middle-aged by Concord standards. Her hair was tied back simply. Her uniform was plain, marked only with symbols the Concord did not yet understand. "This is Commander Elise Morgan of Earth Relief Fleet," the woman said. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. "We have arrived as requested. Please advise safe docking coordinates." There was no pride in her tone, no fear, just readiness. The room released a breath it had not known it was holding. "Coordinates sent," an officer replied quickly. As the transmission ended, Sava noticed something that unsettled her more than any weapon display could have. The human commander had been smiling. The docking bay on Velath Prime had been built for sleek ships, smooth curves, soft lighting, precise tolerances. It had not been built for human vessels. When the first Earth ship moved into position, engineers watched in quiet alarm as its exterior plates shifted slightly, adjusting to the bay's structure. Sections folded inward, others extended outward. It was not elegant, it was adaptable. The ship locked in place with a deep, solid sound that traveled through the station's frame. "That docking clamp just reinforced itself," an engineer whispered. "It reinforced us." Sava arrived moments later, escorted by aides and medical observers. She stood at a safe distance as the air pressure equalized. According to protocol, the arriving species should wait for Concord personnel to approach. The human ship did not wait. The ramp lowered with a soft hiss, and humans walked out. They wore protective gear, but it was light, flexible fabric suits with exposed joints, clear visors, and small packs on their backs. No heavy armor, no sealed environmental shells. Several Concord officials instinctively stepped back. The air of Velath Prime was carefully balanced, but it still carried trace spores and compounds that irritated most off-world species. Humans stepped into it without hesitation. One of the Velathi medical observers gasped quietly. "They're not sealed." "They don't need to be," Sava murmured, though she did not fully understand why. Commander Morgan was among the first to step forward. She removed her helmet entirely, revealing her face to the open air. She took a slow breath, testing it. "Little sweet," she said to one of her team, "but breathable." That sentence alone made several Concord scientists freeze. Sava forced herself to move. She stepped forward, her posture formal but not stiff. "Commander Morgan," she said, "welcome to Velath Prime." Elise inclined her head respectfully. "Director Niran, thank you for trusting us." Trust. The word felt fragile. Within hours, humans were everywhere, not wandering, working. They moved with purpose but without panic. Teams split off smoothly. Some toward environmental control centers, others toward medical facilities, others toward logistics hubs. They asked questions constantly, but not in a way that slowed them down. "Where does this pipe lead?" One Velathi technician watched a human engineer lie flat on a vibrating platform while adjusting a gravity stabilizer. "That frequency causes nausea," the technician said. The human shrugged. "Yeah," he replied, "but it's manageable, manageable." That word appeared again and again in human speech. Storms were manageable, radiation spikes were manageable, supply shortages were manageable, not easy, just manageable. In the main medical complex, Dr. Lion Joe studied alien anatomy displays while walking, not stopping even once. Her tablet showed multiple species at once, color-coded and layered. "You've got fragile circulatory systems," she said to a Velathi doctor beside her. "Low tolerance for inflammation, but good regeneration if stress stays low." "Yes," the Velathi replied carefully. "That is why our procedures are slow and precise." Dr. Joe nodded. "Makes sense," she said. "We'll support that, but we'll also add redundancy, backup units, manual overrides." The Velathi doctor frowned. "Manual overrides? In case automated systems fail," Joe explained. "They are not supposed to fail," the doctor said. Joe smiled kindly. "Ours fail all the time," she said. "That's how we learned." The Velathi did not know how to respond to that. In the council dome, debates began almost immediately. "They move too freely," one counselor said. "They ignore caution markers. They respect boundaries," another argued. "They simply redefine them." Ambassador Renlai watched a live feed of human workers reinforcing an ocean filtration station while standing knee-deep in treated water. "They should be overwhelmed," she said softly. "That toxin level is within acceptable short-term exposure," a human voice interrupted calmly over the shared channel. "We're monitoring vitals." Sava listened more than she spoke. She observed how humans reacted to problems. When a power relay failed during installation, there was no outcry. No blame. A human technician laughed quietly and said, "Okay, Plan B." "What was Plan B?" a conquered observer asked. The human paused. "Didn't have one yet," he said. "Now we do." The observer recorded that sentence for later study. On the second day, a minor crisis struck. A weather stabilization node on a nearby colony world misaligned during recalibration. Conquered forecasts showed a cascading failure that could force evacuation within days. The room filled with tension. "We should pull back," a Conquered official urged. "Stabilize later." Commander Morgan shook her head. "If we wait, the system locks into a worse state," she said. "We can fix it now." "The margin for error is too small," the official insisted. Elise looked at the data, then she looked at her team. "How small?" she asked. A human specialist answered, "About 5%. Elise nodded. "That's workable." The Conquered officials stared at her. 5% is not safe," Sava said carefully. Elise met her gaze. "It's not safe," she agreed. "But it's better than 0. She turned back to her team. "Prep the adaptive anchors. We'll compensate in real time." The operation went forward. For 6 tense hours, humans adjusted systems manually, responding to fluctuations faster than Conquered software could predict. They sweated. They recalculated. They made constant small corrections, and when it was done, the storm patterns eased. The colony was stable, not perfect, stable. The control room went silent. A young Conquered analyst finally whispered, "They gamble." Sava shook her head. "No," she said, "they endure." That night, Sava invited Commander Morgan to a quiet observation deck. Veleth Prime's sky glowed softly, its moons casting gentle light across the atmosphere. "I must ask," Sava said, "why are you so calm?" Elise leaned against the railing. "Because this isn't the worst thing we've handled," she replied honestly. "That is not comforting," Sava said. Elise smiled faintly. "It's not meant to be," she said. "But it's true." Sava hesitated. "Our people fear that your kind thrives on danger." Elise considered that. "We don't thrive on it," she said. "We just don't stop when it shows up." She looked out at the planet. "Your systems are fragile because they were built for peace," she added. "That's not a flaw, it's just a different starting point." "And Earth?" Sava asked. Elise's expression softened. "Earth never gave us that choice," she said. By the end of the third day, Conquered citizens had begun to gather at observation windows. They watched humans work, carry equipment, sit on the floor eating nutrient packs and joking quietly. "They look ordinary," one citizen murmured. "Yes," another replied. "That's what makes it strange." Reports spread through the Conquered's networks. Humans repaired a reactor without full shutdown. Humans slept in shifts and worked through tremors. Humans laughed during power outages. Fear slowly mixed with something new. Hope. Director Sava read the latest status report alone. Casualty rate 0, system stabilization ongoing, human morale stable. At the bottom was a short note from Commander Morgan. "We've only just started. Please don't measure us by perfection, measure us by persistence." Sava closed the report and looked out at her world. They had asked for aid. What had arrived was not gentle, not delicate, but steady. And for the first time in many cycles, the conquered began to believe they might survive what came next. By the fifth day, the Velathi conquered realized something important. The humans were not trying to restore things to how they were before. They were trying to make sure things did not break the same way again. Director Savaniran noticed this while reviewing system updates. The reports no longer spoke of full recovery or original balance. Instead, new words appeared in human notes. Fallback systems installed. Temporary solution, long-term viable. Redundancy added. Sava frowned slightly as she read. Conquered engineers had always aimed for perfection. A system either worked as designed or it was considered a failure. Humans did not seem to think like that at all. In the lower levels of Velath Prime's infrastructure ring, engineer Tomas Reyes wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at the exposed machinery in front of him. Thick cables ran along the walls, patched in places with materials not originally meant to be there. A Velathi engineer, Lurin, stood nearby, visibly uncomfortable. "This configuration is inelegant," Lurin said carefully. Tomas chuckled. "Yeah," he said, "but it'll hold." "But it deviates from optimal flow design," Lurin insisted. "Efficiency loss will increase over time." Tomas nodded. "True," he said, "but if one line fails, the others keep going. You won't lose the whole system." Lurin's frills twitched. "We usually shut down systems to prevent cascading errors. And then everything stops," Tomas replied. "On Earth, that's when people freeze." He tightened a bolt and stepped back to inspect his work. "This way," he continued, "something always keeps running, even if it's ugly." The word ugly confused Lurin. Design was not about beauty to humans. It was about survival. Lurin recorded the exchange for later study. Across the planet, human agricultural teams worked alongside conquered biologists. The conquered had always grown food in controlled environments, perfect temperature, perfect nutrients, perfect timing. Humans brought seeds that made the scientists uneasy. "These plants grow in poor soil," said Dr. Amara Singh. "They're not optimal, but they're stubborn." "Stubborn?" a conquered biologist echoed. "They grow even when conditions change," Singh explained. "Heat, cold, low nutrients, they adapt fast." The conquered biologist hesitated. "But their yield is lower," Singh smiled. "Yes," she said, "but they keep producing when others fail." Fields were planted anyway. Within days, the plants took root, not beautifully, not evenly, but they lived. The biggest change, however, was not physical, it was mental. Human planners began holding open meetings with conquered staff. Not formal councils, not structured debates, just shared rooms where problems were spoken aloud. "We might lose this system in 3 months," a conquered technician admitted during one meeting. "Okay," a human planner said. "What happens if we do?" The technician froze. "That means failure." "No," the human replied calmly. "That means step 2. Step 2. The idea spread quickly. Humans spoke openly about worst outcomes without shame. They planned for them. They expected things to go wrong and built responses ahead of time. To the conquered, this felt dangerously pessimistic. To humans, it was normal. Not everyone was comfortable. Ambassador Renlai watched humans reroute energy flows through backup channels that had not been used in decades. "They trust uncertainty too much," she said to Sava. "They trust preparation," Sava replied. Renlai folded her hands. "Our people fear that adopting human methods will change who we are." Sava considered that. "Perhaps," she said, "but extinction would change us more." A test came sooner than expected. On the outer world of Lethara 9, an orbital platform detected a sudden atmospheric imbalance. Conquered models predicted a slow failure over weeks. Human sensors caught something different. "This will spike faster," said analyst Priya Nandakumar. "Not weeks, hours." The conquered command team panicked. "Evacuate non-essential staff," someone called. "We don't have transport capacity," another replied, the room filled with overlapping voices. Commander Morgan raised her hand, not high, just enough. "Everyone breathe," she said calmly. The room quieted, surprised by the simplicity of the request. She turned to her team. "Options," Priya spoke first. "We can vent controlled pressure through the old mining shafts." A conquered officer protested. "Those are unstable." "Yes," Priya agreed, "but they're already broken. We can use that." Silence followed. Using broken systems on purpose felt wrong to the conquered. But time was running out. Sava met Elise's eyes. Slowly, she nodded. Proceed, Sava said. Humans worked fast. They did not try to fix the imbalance directly. Instead, they gave it somewhere safe to go. Pressure released in controlled bursts. The atmosphere stabilized at a lower level but remained breathable. The platform survived. When the danger passed, the conquered team stared at the data. You saved it by letting it break, a technician whispered. Elise nodded. Sometimes, she said, that's the only way. Later, Sava walked through a temporary human operations hub. It was messy. Cables crossed walkways, notes were stuck to walls, people talked while working, and yet everything functioned. She stopped near a table where several humans were eating and reviewing data. Director, Tomas said, noticing her. Something wrong? No, Sava said. Something new, she hesitated. On our worlds, failure is seen as weakness. Tomas leaned back. On Earth, he said, failure is how we learn what survives. Sava looked around the room. Does it not exhaust you? She asked. Living like this? Tomas smiled, tired but genuine. Sometimes, he admitted, but stopping would exhaust us more. Reports continued to arrive. Systems still failed, but now they failed slowly instead of all at once. Colonies learned to adapt instead of panic. Conquered engineers began asking human-style questions. What happens if this goes wrong? A Velathi student submitted a paper titled Controlled Imperfection as a survival strategy. It caused heated debate across academic networks. Not everyone approved. Some elders warned that humans were dangerous not because of strength, but because of influence. They make chaos acceptable, one elder said. No, another replied. They make chaos survivable. On the seventh day, Commander Morgan sent a message to the council. We recommend training conquered teams in independent response, it said. You shouldn't rely on us forever. Sava read the message twice. They're teaching us to live without them, Minister Havoc observed. Yes, Sava said softly, which means they truly came to help. That evening, the first joint training exercise began. Conquered crews worked alongside humans, practicing responses to simulated failures. Mistakes were made. Humans corrected them calmly. Try again, they said. That's okay, they said. Now you know, they said. No blame, no shame. Something shifted in the conquered psyche. For the first time, failure did not feel like the end. As night settled over Velath Prime, Sava stood once more at the observation deck. The lights below flickered, not as a sign of weakness, but as part of a controlled cycle. She realized then what made humans truly frightening. They did not wait for safety to act. They built safety while moving forward. And once that way of thinking took root, it could not be undone. The conquered had asked for aid. What they were receiving was a new definition of survival. The calm of Velath Prime's skies hid a growing storm beneath the surface. Not a storm of wind or heat, but one of thought, fear, and politics. The conquered's leaders had watched the humans work for over a week. Everywhere the aliens saw systems stabilized, colonies repaired, and morale lifted. But everywhere they also felt a subtle shift. Humans did not fit neatly into the careful, ordered structure of the conquered. Some leaders loved it, others hated it. Director Sava Niran walked slowly through the council dome, her mind heavy. On her left, Ambassador Renlai of the Illith whispered with a cluster of diplomats. On her right, Minister Havoc of the Tresari studied the reports in near silence. They move too fast, Renlai said softly. They bypass procedures, they improvise, and our people follow. Soon, humans may not just stabilize systems, they may control them. Sava did not answer immediately. The thought was uncomfortable but not untrue. Humans were not asking for control, but their presence shaped decisions, methods, and even beliefs. Havoc's voice broke her thoughts. Sava, we cannot ignore what the Velathi populace is saying. They admire the humans, yes, but some are afraid. Afraid that reliance on Earth will change us permanently. Change is inevitable, Sava replied carefully. Better change while we survive than stagnate while we perish. Renlai's eyes narrowed. Survival at the cost of our autonomy may not be survival at all. Sava did not respond further. She walked toward the observation windows overlooking the bustling human camps below. In the fields of Lethara 9, human engineers had implemented an adaptive water recycling system. Conquered scientists had watched skeptically at first, expecting failures or minor collapses. Instead, the humans worked quietly, correcting small errors as they arose. They discussed openly what might go wrong, then built temporary safeguards. Every failure became a lesson. Every adjustment became a new protocol. A Velathi engineer named Irel watched a human climb into a cramped maintenance hatch. She feared the human would collapse in the tight space. Instead, the human worked for hours, adjusting valves and recalibrating sensors, then emerged smiling, hands dirty but proud. "It is impressive," Irel whispered. "But what if something fails catastrophically?" The human, overhearing her, laughed lightly. "Then we fix it again. And again if needed. That's the way we survive." The simplicity of the statement struck Irel. It was almost frightening. These beings did not fear failure. They treated it as natural, manageable, and temporary. In the council dome, debates escalated. Ambassador Kith of the Moru clicked sharply. "We asked for aid, not a revolution. Humans are reshaping how we think, how we operate, even how we value our own systems." Renlai nodded. "Exactly. If we rely too heavily on Earth, their philosophy may dominate our governance. Our species could lose its voice in its own decisions." Sava listened, her mind tracing the threads of concern. "Humans are not taking control," she said slowly. "They are showing us what is possible. Our people choose to adopt it or not." Kith's antennae twitched. "And if our people adopt it willingly, at what point does adoption become dependency?" The question hung over the room like a shadow. Meanwhile, humans continued their work without concern for politics. At the docking station, Commander Elise Morgan reviewed incoming reports. A series of small failures had occurred in minor supply channels. "Not perfect," she admitted aloud to her team, "but manageable. We'll adapt and reinforce." A Velathi aide frowned. "You call risking system collapse manageable?" Morgan smiled. "I call it necessary." Across the room, engineers from several species began noting her phrasing. They began to repeat it almost unconsciously. "Manageable," they said. "Adapt, reinforce, necessary." Sava noted it too. Words, simple as they were, had the power to reshape thought. The humans were teaching by example, not orders. Tension rose when a sudden microquake struck the northern colonies. Structures trembled. Alarms rang. Conquered engineers froze, unsure of the proper response. Humans acted immediately. Teams split, some directing energy to stabilize foundations, others rerouting water and power. The quake caused minor damage, but no systems collapsed entirely. Afterward, a human technician laughed softly. "Not perfect, but survives. That's what matters." The phrase repeated itself through reports, discussions, and informal meetings. Conquered citizens began murmuring it too, almost like a mantra. Some leaders were alarmed, others were inspired, and some wondered if inspiration itself might be dangerous. Sava called a private meeting with Commander Morgan. The humans were cooperative but honest. They did not wish to hide the strain of their work. "Your teams are remarkable," Sava said, "but our people worry that the lessons you bring may be permanent. That we may depend too much on you." Morgan considered the statement. "Director, we didn't come to replace you. We came to show you options. You are free to adopt them or not." Sava hesitated. "Even if we don't adopt them, we will remember them." Morgan nodded. "Then at least you'll have tools to survive. That's all we can guarantee." It was a truth Sava could not argue. Humans offered aid, yes, but the aid was more than tools or supplies. It was perspective, philosophy, and resilience. The first fractures in conquered politics began to show. Some worlds insisted humans should leave after stabilization. "They are too disruptive," they argued. "Their methods alter not just systems, but minds." Others urged continued collaboration. "We need them," they said. "They understand failure in ways we cannot. Our people survive because of it." Council meetings became battlegrounds of ideas, not weapons. Words clashed, philosophies collided, debate raged. Sava observed all of it quietly. Humans worked in the background, continuing repairs, training, and stabilization. They did not interfere with the politics. They simply existed, and yet their presence influenced every decision. On Lethara 9, a particularly difficult engineering problem emerged. A long-damaged water filtration node required complete manual oversight. Conquered engineers hesitated. "We should follow protocol," one said. "Shut it down until replacements arrive." Morgan's team evaluated. "Shutdown risks complete system failure," a human engineer said. "We adapt while online." The conquered team watched as humans crawled into pipes, climbed along exterior supports, and adjusted valves in real time. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed. Systems flowed. When the work finished, the humans emerged smiling. "This is how survival works," one human technician said. Not by avoiding problems, by facing them and keeping going. The lesson was clear and unsettling. By the end of the week, conquered leaders faced a new challenge. Humans were helping to save their worlds. Their methods worked. Systems that had seemed doomed now stabilized. Morale improved. And yet some leaders whispered privately, "What will happen when the humans leave?" Sava understood their fear. Humans did not intend to stay forever. They came to aid, not rule. And yet the example they set had begun to change everything. Systems were more resilient. People were more confident. Citizens began solving problems independently but in the human style, adaptive, flexible, ready for failure. Dependence could grow even without humans intending it. That night, Sava walked the observation deck once more. The city below glowed with life, stabilized and functioning, yet different. Systems hummed in new patterns. Citizens moved with a subtle, human-inspired confidence. She thought of Commander Morgan's words, "We show options, you choose." Sava realized that aid had a price, not one paid in credits or labor, but in thought and habit. The conquered could survive, but survival would not be the same as before. Change was inevitable. Fear was natural. But with humans, hope became real. And the conquered had to decide, would they embrace the price of survival or resist it? Below, humans worked quietly. No demand, no orders, just persistence, ingenuity, and a calm certainty that everything could be fixed, even when it was broken. Sava knew then that the real challenge was not the environment, not the failing systems, and not even the political unrest. The real challenge was learning to survive in the human way. And that might be the hardest task of all. On several outer worlds of the conquered, environmental systems faltered. Tectonic shifts, failing filtration units, and unpredictable weather patterns threatened colonies already stretched thin. Supplies were running low. Panic had started to creep back into local populations. Many of the conquered's allies had quietly withdrawn, citing their own vulnerabilities. Ships pulled back, teams returned home. Plans for long-term stabilization were postponed. The humans did not. In the docking bay of Velath Prime, human engineers continued to unload supplies. Pallets of adaptive food, portable medical units, and modular shelter kits were stacked neatly along the hangar floor. A conquered officer approached, concern evident. "Commander Morgan," she said. "Some worlds are too dangerous now. We suggest withdrawing your teams and returning once conditions stabilize." Morgan glanced up, calm as ever. "And leave people to collapse?" she asked softly. "We didn't come here to watch them fail." The officer hesitated. "It's risky." "Even for you," Morgan smiled faintly. "Risk is part of survival," she said. "If you're unwilling to take it for your people, someone else has to." The officer left, unsettled by the simple certainty in her voice. Meanwhile, across the conquered, reports flowed in. On Lethara 9, humans worked alongside local engineers to repair a power station that had partially failed after a microquake. Conquered crews argued about protocol, about safety, about acceptable risk. Humans argued only about solutions. "We'll run parallel circuits," a human technician said. "One stabilizes the flow while the other recalibrates. If one fails, the other still holds." A Velathi engineer raised a concern. "If both fail, it could trigger system-wide collapse." The human shook his head. "Then we fail fast and fix fast. We adapt. We survive." By the end of the day, the station was fully operational, stronger than it had been before. Conquered engineers stared at the results in disbelief. Political tension grew in the council dome. "Earth cannot continue like this," Ambassador Renlai said sharply. "Our worlds must remain autonomous. Relying on humans for stabilization will change everything." "Change is happening whether we like it or not," Director Sava replied. "Do you prefer collapse over learning?" Renlai's tentacles twitched in frustration. "Learning or dependence, there is a difference." Sava did not answer. She had begun to understand that humans were not here to create dependence. They were here to create possibility. On Velath Prime, Sava observed the humans in action. They were everywhere. At medical centers, repairing equipment and training local doctors. At engineering hubs, correcting structural faults while teaching conquered technicians new methods. In fields, planting adaptive crops and showing farmers how to nurture them. And they never complained. They worked long hours, sometimes without sleep, sometimes under difficult conditions. Yet they smiled, joked quietly, and encouraged local crews. "They are tireless," one Velathi aide whispered. "How can they endure so much?" Sava thought about it. Humans did not endure by avoiding exhaustion. They endured because they expected it. They were built for adversity, for uncertainty, for failure, and they thrived anyway. A new challenge arose on the outer world of Vayara 6. Rising storms threatened a colony dependent on delicate atmospheric processors. Conquered engineers hesitated. "We should evacuate the colony," one suggested. "It's too dangerous." Morgan's voice came over the comm link. "Evacuation is always an option," she said, "but we can also adapt the processors in real time. We'll need all hands, but we can do it." The Conquered crew hesitated, weighing safety against survival. Finally, Sava authorized the operation. Humans and Conquered engineers worked together. Temporary barriers were erected. Backup processors deployed. Sensors monitored every shift in weather. Hours later, when the storm passed, the colony remained intact. Residents cheered quietly, afraid to disturb the humans working tirelessly among them. "Not perfect," a human said to a Conquered technician, "but it survives." And that phrase spread quickly among the Conquered. It survives. That evening in the council dome, debate raged. "Humans are changing our citizens," Ambassador Kith said. "They admire them too much. Soon they will follow Earth's methods blindly. Or they will learn to survive," Sava countered. "And that is what we need." Renlai shook her head. "But at what cost, morally, culturally? Our way of life is being rewritten." Sava's gaze drifted to the observation screens. Below, humans continued their work, tirelessly and without complaint. "They are not rewriting our culture," she said softly. "They are showing us another way to exist. Whether we take it or not is our choice." And that was the key difference. Humans offered options, not commands. Back on Lethara 9, a small child approached a human engineer named Tomas Reyes. "Will you leave?" the child asked timidly. Tomas smiled down. "We'll leave when your worlds can handle themselves," he said. "Until then, we stay." The child nodded, eyes wide. The human's calm certainty was contagious. Adults nearby began to murmur the same hope. It was not magic, it was persistence. Humans stayed because it was right, not because it was safe. Conquered leaders began to notice subtle shifts. Local populations no longer panicked as quickly. Engineers were more willing to attempt repairs. Students learned human methods of redundancy, adaptation, and endurance. Some elders still feared dependence. "They are too clever," one whispered. "They teach too much too fast." Others quietly acknowledged the truth. "Perhaps this is how survival works," another said. "We can resist or we can learn." Sava thought about it late that night. Survival always had a price. Sometimes it was wealth, sometimes it was effort, sometimes it was change. Humans had shown the Conquered a new price, and it was not heavy, it was honest, it was necessary. On Velath Prime, Commander Morgan reviewed incoming reports. Several worlds were now fully stabilized, or at least survivable. Many others were improving steadily. Yet the real measure of success was not the data, it was the people. Citizens of the Conquered were learning to think differently, to plan for failure, to endure. They were growing confident in their own abilities, guided by the calm persistence of humans who refused to leave, no matter how dangerous conditions became. Morgan turned to her team. "We're not finished," she said, "but every day we stay makes a difference. Every system we stabilize, every mind we teach is survival multiplied." Her team nodded. They did not need more orders, they already understood. That night, Sava returned to the observation deck. Below, lights glimmered across Velath Prime, each representing humans and Conquered citizens working together. She thought about the words Morgan had spoken during their first meeting. "We stay because someone asked for help." They had not come for glory. They had not come for recognition. They had not come for politics. They had come for duty and persistence. Sava realized something profound. The humans were not just aiding the Conquered. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson it had long forgotten. Survival was not about fear. It was about will, even when conditions worsened, even when allies left, even when failure seemed likely. Humans did not leave, and the Conquered had a choice. They could cling to the past, fear change, and survive only if luck favored them. Or they could embrace the example of the Deathworlders, adapt, persist, endure, and survive on their own terms. Sava felt the weight of the decision settle over her. It was heavy, yes, but it was hopeful. Because for the first time in cycles, she knew the Conquered would not face extinction alone. Below, humans continued their work, steady as stone, tireless as the mountains of their homeworld. And the Conquered realized that in the presence of Earth, survival was no longer a gamble, it was a lesson. A lesson in persistence, a lesson in endurance, a lesson in hope. The conquered worlds were no longer teetering on the edge of collapse. Systems that once seemed fragile now hummed steadily. Colonies had survived storms, power failures, and environmental shifts that would have crippled them before. Yet the greatest change was not in infrastructure. It was in the people. On the planet of Lethara 9, children gathered near human engineers, watching them demonstrate adaptive crop planting. A Velathi student named Irel leaned over and whispered to her friend, "They can make anything survive, even things we thought impossible." Her friend nodded. "And they teach us to do the same." A human engineer, noticing the curious Velathi children, smiled and said, "Survival isn't about avoiding problems, it's about learning from them and keeping going." Irel repeated the words quietly, almost like a new mantra. Learning from problems and keeping going. It was simple, but for Velathians it was revolutionary. In the council dome, debate continued. Some leaders still feared humans' influence. "They make survival look effortless," Ambassador Kith of the Moru clicked sharply. "Our people admire them too much. Soon we may forget our own methods entirely." Sava listened quietly. She had learned to recognize fear when it was disguised as concern. "They are not replacing us," she said softly. "They are showing us what is possible. It is up to us to choose which lessons to accept." Renlai, the Illith ambassador, frowned. "And if we choose wrong, if we adopt their methods too quickly, then we adapt again," Sava replied. "That is the point." The room fell silent. Even those skeptical could not argue with the logic. On Velath Prime, humans worked alongside Concord engineers to redesign energy distribution networks. The original Concord designs had focused on efficiency and minimal risk. Humans approached the problem differently. They built redundancy into every system. Backup conduits ran alongside main lines. Power regulators could be rerouted manually in minutes. Even if one component failed, the system as a whole could continue. A Velathi engineer observing the work commented, "This is inefficient." Morgan replied, "It's resilient." The word resonated. Efficiency was no longer the only measure of success. Resilience mattered more. In the outer colonies, conquered leaders began to see the effects of human methods firsthand. On Vayara 6, storms had returned, stronger than before. Citizens braced for damage. Conquered engineers prepared emergency protocols. Humans smiled calmly. "We can handle it," said a technician. As the storm raged, human teams monitored every system, made real-time adjustments, and instructed local crews on adaptive responses. When the storm finally passed, damage was minimal. Water systems functioned. Power grids held. Crops had survived unexpected flooding. One young Velathi engineer whispered, "They didn't fight the storm, they used it." "Exactly," said a human volunteer. "You can't always stop nature. You can survive it and learn from it." The lesson spread quickly through conquered communication channels. At the council dome, Sava convened a special meeting. "Humans have stabilized several colonies," she said. "They've done more than repair systems. They've changed how our people think about risk, failure, and persistence." Renlai spoke sharply. "And that is dangerous. If our citizens adopt their philosophy blindly, our culture could be lost." Sava leaned forward. "Or it could be strengthened. Our citizens are learning to endure without fear. They are learning to solve problems independently. That is strength, not weakness." Kith clicked, frustrated. "It is unfamiliar strength. We cannot predict the consequences." "Then we adapt," Sava said, "just like the humans." The council fell silent. Even the skeptics had to admit she had a point. Elsewhere, human engineers led joint training sessions with conquered teams. They simulated equipment failures, environmental hazards, and supply shortages. When systems failed, humans did not panic. They improvised, adapted, and repaired. They encouraged conquered engineers to try new methods. Mistakes were accepted. Lessons were learned. By the end of the day, conquered crews were no longer hesitant. They began solving problems in real time using human strategies. Backup plans, redundancy, and adaptation became familiar tools rather than foreign concepts. Sava watched from the observation deck. "Humans are not just helping us survive," she said quietly. "They're teaching us to be stronger on our own." On Vayara 6, a particularly challenging problem emerged. A hydroelectric facility faced partial failure after shifting tectonic plates. Conquered engineers hesitated. Morgan stepped forward. "We have a plan," she said. We'll stabilize core units, reroute energy through auxiliary conduits, and reinforce structural supports manually. Some parts may fail, but the facility as a whole will continue to operate. A Velathi technician looked uneasy. What if the auxiliary fails too? Morgan smiled. Then we adapt again. That's how survival works. Hours later, the facility was running at full capacity. The Concord crew was exhausted but exhilarated. They had learned not just to survive, but to endure with confidence. On Velath Prime, Sava called a private meeting with Morgan. "You've changed more than systems," Sava said. "Our people are thinking differently. They are taking risks, improvising solutions, and learning to survive on their own." Morgan nodded. "That was the goal. We didn't come here to take control. We came to show you what's possible. Your people are proving they can rise to the challenge." Sava hesitated. "Do humans ever tire?" Morgan smiled softly. "We do, but we prepare for it. We rotate, rest, plan ahead. Survival is not about endless energy. It's about persistence over time." The simplicity of the answer struck Sava. Humans were not superpowered. They were disciplined, persistent, and unafraid of failure. Across the Concord, changes became noticeable. Local engineers worked faster. Citizens reported minor crises before they became disasters. School curriculums included human-inspired lessons on adaptation, redundancy, and resilience. Even skeptical leaders could not deny the benefits. Conquered worlds were stabilizing. Colonies were thriving despite conditions that had once seemed hopeless. Yet the humans continued to insist, "We're only showing you the way. You choose how to use it." One evening, Sava walked along a quiet observation corridor. She looked down at Velath Prime. Lights from human and Conquered teams glimmered like stars on the surface. She thought about the weeks that had passed. Humans had arrived as outsiders, feared and mistrusted. Now they were teachers, not of commands, but of endurance, not of obedience, but of persistence. Sava realized that true strength was not in technology, speed, or even knowledge. True strength was in the will to survive, to adapt, and to keep moving forward despite every failure and setback. Humans had redefined strength for the Conquered. And the Conquered had no choice but to accept it. At the end of the week, Commander Morgan sent a final report before a temporary rotation of teams. "Your people are learning quickly," it said. "They are becoming resilient. They will make mistakes, but they will endure. Our teams will return for the next stage, but the real strength now lies within your people." Sava read the message twice. She felt a swell of pride. The humans had not only stabilized systems, they had inspired a galaxy to survive. And the Conquered had begun to believe they could. Because survival was no longer just about equipment, plans, or calculations. It was about will, persistence, endurance, and the courage to face failure and continue. Below, humans prepared for their next mission, checking equipment and coordinating logistics. They were calm, focused, and ready. The Conquered had once asked for aid. What they had received was more than aid. It was a living lesson in what it meant to endure. And for the first time in cycles, the Conquered understood that strength was not about avoiding risk, but about redefining it and surviving anyway. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. And in the quiet glow of Velath Prime, Sava whispered to herself, "This is what it means to be human." The first light of Velath Prime's twin suns stretched across the horizon. The city below glimmered like a field of tiny stars. People moved quickly but confidently, their work steady and purposeful. Weeks of human intervention had passed. The Conquered had survived crises that once seemed hopeless. Entire colonies had been stabilized. Resources had been rationed and optimized. Schools and training centers now taught human-inspired methods, redundancy, adaptation, and resilience. And yet, for director Sava Niran, the most profound change was not in the systems, nor in the technology, but in the people themselves. In the council dome, a special session had been called. Leaders from every Conquered species were present. Some faces were excited, some were hesitant, some still carried doubt. Sava stood before the assembly. "We asked for aid," she began, and aid came. But it was more than supplies, more than technology. It was a lesson in survival, endurance, and hope. She paused, letting her words sink in. "We have learned to face failure without fear, to prepare for it, to adapt, and to continue. That is a change no ship, no system, no manual could have taught us alone. That is the work of humans." A murmur ran through the room. Some leaders nodded. Others looked away, contemplating the truth. Across Veleth Prime, humans were finishing the final phases of stabilization projects. On Lethara 9, children ran through fields of adaptive crops. The plants were not perfect. They did not grow evenly. Some leaves were twisted, some stems shorter than expected, but they thrived. Humans watched quietly, offering guidance when necessary, but mostly allowing the local farmers to take charge. They had taught them methods of survival, and now it was the Conquered's turn to lead. A young Velathi girl approached Tomas Reyes, a human engineer. "Will you stay?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. Tomas crouched to meet her gaze. "We will always come back if you need us," he said. "But you're strong enough to keep going. You don't need us to stay forever." The girl thought about it, then nodded. "Then we will do it ourselves." In the outer colonies, humans were assisting the last installations of adaptive infrastructure. Power stations, water processors, and environmental regulators hummed steadily. Conquered engineers oversaw the work, but humans were always close by, ready to help. The difference now was subtle. Conquered crews were no longer hesitant. They did not second-guess every decision. They had internalized the human methods, anticipating failure, preparing alternatives, and maintaining calm even in unpredictable situations. Even minor mistakes were no longer catastrophic. Each problem was a lesson, not a disaster. In the council dome, Ambassador Renlai addressed the assembly. "I admit, I feared human methods would compromise our autonomy, but I see now that they have strengthened it. Our people have learned to survive, not by relying on others, but by applying the lessons we were shown. They are stronger than before." Ambassador Kith of the Moru clicked softly, a sound of reluctant approval. "Perhaps we have misjudged them," he said. "Humans do not impose control. They show paths and allow others to choose. That is true strength." Sava felt a swell of pride. The Council had witnessed the value of Earth's aid, but more importantly, they had seen the transformative effect on their people. Meanwhile, Commander Elise Morgan reviewed final reports from all operational sites. Systems were stable. Colonies were capable of managing themselves. Conquered teams were competent and confident. She spoke to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Rafik Bennett. "Our work here is done, for now," she said. "We taught them to survive, not to depend. That is the real mission accomplished." Rafik nodded. "They learned fast, too fast for some, maybe." Morgan smiled. "They were ready. Sometimes you underestimate a species until you see them in action." Humans had always known that survival was not about perfection. It was about persistence, adaptability, and willpower, and now the Conquered had learned the same lesson. On Veleth Prime, Sava walked among the citizens. She observed engineers troubleshooting minor problems, teachers guiding students in adaptive planning, and medical teams applying human-inspired protocols. It was a world still imperfect, still vulnerable, but it was alive, and it was resilient. A Velathi technician approached Sava. "Director," he said, "I used to fear failure. Now I understand it is part of the process. Humans showed me that." Sava smiled. "And now you show yourself." The technician nodded, understanding that the lesson extended beyond the humans. Survival was now part of their own culture. The final morning of human operations arrived. Ships were loaded with equipment for redeployment to other urgent crises. Crews made their final checks, calm and efficient. Sava met Commander Morgan on the observation deck. "Your teams have done more than we could have imagined," she said. "Not just stabilizing systems, but changing the way we think." Morgan shook her head. "We didn't do it alone. Your people chose to learn. That choice made the difference. We simply showed the way." Sava considered this, feeling the truth of it. Humans had taught resilience. They had taught endurance. And they had left the choice to embrace it firmly in the hands of the Conquered. Citizens and officials gathered to see the human ships depart. Children waved. Engineers saluted. Council members watched silently, realizing that this moment was not an end, but a beginning. Tomas Reyes stood at the railing, looking at Veleth Prime one last time. "Remember," he said quietly to the crowd, "survival isn't about avoiding failure. It's about what you do after it happens. You've learned that here, keep it." Commander Morgan's voice came over the comm link to all observers. "We go now, but your strength remains. Continue, adapt, persist. You can survive anything." The human ships lifted off slowly, engines humming gently, leaving trails of light across the sky. The Conquered watched in silence, awe, and gratitude. In the days following the departure, the changes were subtle but undeniable. Students practiced human-inspired problem-solving exercises. Engineers built redundancy into their systems naturally. Citizens discussed adaptive strategies in daily conversation. Failure no longer brought fear. Mistakes no longer caused despair. The conquered had internalized the human lesson. Persistence, adaptation, and will were the ultimate tools of survival. Even the council found themselves thinking differently. Decisions were made with flexibility in mind. Protocols included backup plans and contingency options. Risk was no longer paralyzing. It was a challenge to meet and overcome. At the observation deck, Sava stood alone as the last ship disappeared into the distant stars. "They taught us to survive," she whispered, "and in doing so, they taught us who we can be." A young Velathi student approached. "Director," she asked, "will they come back?" Sava looked at the girl and smiled softly. "If we need them, they will, but we will be ready even if they don't. That is the real lesson." The student nodded, understanding more than her years suggested. Across the conquered, the phrase began to circulate quietly. "We asked for aid. What we received was the will to survive." It was simple, true, and powerful. No longer was humanity just a distant, mysterious species from a harsh world. They had become the standard of endurance, the living example of how to face adversity, and the inspiration for a galaxy learning to survive on its own terms. Velath Prime, once fragile and fearful, now stood resilient. Other conquered worlds followed suit. Citizens, engineers, students, and leaders alike carried the human lesson in their minds and hearts. The galaxy had asked for help. What it had received was hope. And that hope was unstoppable. From the quiet edge of space, Earth ships vanished among the stars, unaware of the full scope of their impact. They had come to aid, but their gift went far beyond tools or systems. They had shown a galaxy what it meant to endure. The conquered watched, forever changed, knowing that the human way, adaptable, persistent, and unafraid, would guide them for generations. In the final analysis, no weapons had been used, no battles fought. Survival had been won through courage, ingenuity, and the simple truth that giving someone the tools to endure was the greatest aid of all. And for the first time in countless cycles, the conquered believed, not in luck, not in chance, but in themselves. Because they had learned from humans that the strongest force in the galaxy was not technology, it was will.